A new Eden, a new Adam, a new Eve, but faced with the same old serpent wearing new skin. Perelandra is the second book in the space trilogy by C.S. Lewis, the first being Out of the Silent Planet, which I reviewed earlier. I'll provide a link to that review below. Like the last review, I will try to keep the spoilers to a minimum, hopefully just enough to entice you to read the entire trilogy. This book, like Out of the Silent Planet, while part of the trilogy as a whole, can also be read standalone, and while some context may be missing, Lewis works enough history into the story in order to make it work on its own. Our narrator is again Lewis himself. He introduces the story while he's heading to a meeting with our protagonist, Elim Ransom, who was the protagonist in Out of the Silent Planet. Now there is a war going on, World War II, and the situation is not pleasant. Lewis, after getting off of a train and then running a gauntlet of unaccustomed dark and very frightening thoughts, read the book to learn the true origin of the thoughts, arrives at the country cottage Ransom is living in. However, though he was expecting Lewis, Ransom had to make an unexpected visit to Cambridge College and is not home. Therefore, Lewis enters the cottage and meets Oyarsa, the Eldila whom we met in the first book, Out of the Silent Planet. Eldila are mostly invisible unless they choose to take a form. Ransom arrives shortly after and informs Lewis that he is preparing to travel, with the aid of Oyarsa, to the planet of Perelandra, and he wants Lewis and a couple of others to watch for his return. But why is he heading to Perelandra? We don't know that for sure until roughly 3/4 of the way through the book, when Ransom's old nemesis, Weston, who was responsible for kidnapping him in the first book, arrives on Perelandra. In short order, we learn that Ransom, a World War I vet, is to do some form of battle. But with who? With Weston. But is Weston truly any longer Weston? The battle begins as an intense debate, with Ransom occasionally gaining the upper hand. But within a few days, yes, the verbal debate lasts a few days, it turns physical. Perelandra, a world whose location I shall not reveal, do read the book to find out where it is, was mentioned briefly in Out of the Silent Planet. It is an ocean world with almost no land masses. The inhabitants, whom I'll get to in a moment, occupy massive floating islands of vegetation which roll up and down the waves. The islands rarely stay in one location for long, and may group together to form massive supercontinents until the next group of waves comes along and breaks them up. Ransom and the occupants feed on wondrous fruits and vegetation while walking through giant, refreshing bubbles released by some of the trees. Native creatures include animals resembling frogs, dragons, mermaids, strangely shaped fish, which can be ridden like a horse, and many tropical birds. None of these creatures prove dangerous to Ransom, and indeed most either ignore him or are friendly towards him, such as one of the dragons. There are also 2 human-appearing life forms, a man and a woman, called the King and the Queen. We do not meet the King until very late in the book, almost at the end. The Queen, Ransom, and Weston are our primary characters. The King and Queen are, other than Ransom, the only human inhabitants of Perelandra. Another clue as to who they are. And they have skin with a greenish tint. Though the trilogy is in no way allegory, as Lewis himself stated, it certainly parallels the book of Genesis, and we eventually learn that the King and Queen, or Tor and Tinadril as their proper names are are the Adam and Eve of Perelandra. Perhaps it is easier to picture the situation if you realize that Perelandra is made to be an Eden. With this information, you can guess who now occupies the Earthman which was Weston. He is not just a devil. He is the devil, the serpent of Genesis, the exact same one who tempted Eve. We also learn that Ransom is a devout Christian, not beyond the realm of inevitability for 1930s, especially for an Oxford scholar such as Lewis was. The debate begins first between Weston and the lady, as Ransom calls the Queen, with Weston doing his best to tempt her into deliberate disobedience of the being known as Maleldil. Maleldil regularly talks to her, though we never actually hear his voice or see him, giving her guidance and pointing out that there is one forbidden fruit, if you will, although not a food in this case, but a place she and the king must never stay in overnight. Ransom eventually joins the debate, attempting to thwart the temptation. Within the debate we learn the true identity of the creature which was Weston, now known as the Unman by Ransom. Ransom despairs of winning the verbal debate, so Maleldil puts all creatures, including Ransom and the Unman, into a deep sleep, allowing Ransom to actually gain much-needed rest after the days of debate. Upon waking, the debate turns physical, including some boxing, and the Marquess of Queensberry rules are thrown out the window. This is, as you can imagine, a battle to prevent the Serpent from repeating on the Perelandra Eden what he accomplished on Earth Eden. I'm not going to go into any further detail in the story. Suffice it to say, the final battle takes place on the floating islands, into the sea, into caves, and through fire, to a satisfying conclusion. At least it was satisfying to me. How about the writing? How does it compare to Out of the Silent Planet? Often when I speak of such things as books, movies, and TV shows, I will occasionally use two phrases. 1, it was strange. 2, it was cerebral. This book has its odd moments, but how can it not? It is science fiction after all. But it is incredibly cerebral in its style. And what do I mean by cerebral? It's slow-paced, requires a great deal of concentration, and it is essentially highly academic in nature. And where Out of the Silent Planet contained just a couple of words I marked down to look up meanings, this book has many. Indeed, I have multiple pages with words circled on them. I'm not referring to the made-up words legions of Star Trek fans have come to know as technobabble, but such words as pugilist, conge, heraldic, Titian satyr, and so on. Titian, by the way, was an artist, and a satyr is a character from Greek mythology. But how about disbelief? Was I able to suspend that? Yes, I was. The novel, in spite of being cerebral and slow at times, managed to keep my attention. I really wanted to know what happened next and how it concluded. Do I recommend this book? Yes, indeed, especially if you have an imagination tickled by lots and lots and lots of detail. But be aware, it is a different type of writing style for Lewis. Jamata.